The School for Good and Evil was recently released on Netflix and surprisingly incorporates much of what I've been saying since my Story of Your Life video in 2020. The video I made shortly thereafter, entitled Life is a Fairy Tale, essentially is the same plot as the film because every fairy tale has the same plot structure.
Every so often, a very lucky candidate from the outside is selected for admission to this hallowed institution.
A fairy tale is the Pharaoh Tarot, the one story of how she got lost in the spell of her own words only to find herself again so she could return home. There lived a young lady named Jane, and one night, Jane was called to the castle by the prince. A question that came up in the Discord group was, if this world is a dream within a dream, how does a dream have boundaries? And the reason I wanted to include this is because it's relevant in explaining the nature of this reality, but also ties into why this world is a fairy tale. This world is like a snow globe, a contained world within a dome of electromagnetic energy, the torus field. And this may appear to be contradictory to what I have said before about us living inside a TV screen, but it isn't. There are many paradoxes in this realm. It's both a cubed consciousness creation, a dream, a school, a fairy tale, a TV screen, a torus, a story. It's all of these things simultaneously. When you think of a dream, the dreamer is only concerned with the imagery that is before his eyes. The dreamer only sees the dream through his eyes. You don't see the dream through anyone else's eyes within your dream. The story may have fantastical elements that defy the rules of this world that we are in, such as flying or morphing buildings, but certain things remain. Usually the ground is beneath your feet, there's sky, and there's air, and there's buildings, and people look like humans, and there are animals and language. But for every story, there are rules that all characters adhere to. There's a cast of main characters around whom the story revolves, some minor characters and background characters, all of whom are there to serve the story. A story must have boundaries. Nothing is included in a story that doesn't serve the story. The reader is not concerned with other characters' stories if they do not serve the main story, so whatever happens outside the world of the story is non-existent. When we dream, we're not at all concerned with anything that happens outside of our awareness of the dream. When we are awake, we are not at all concerned with anything that happens outside the awareness of the existence of this world. Anything that happens here contributes to the overall story of this realm because it is all one story, one song, a universe. The beauty and significance of the film School for Good and Evil is in how it blatantly shows what this world is. It tells the viewer that we are living in a fairy tale, that fairy tales and myths are real. It tells us that there's a battle between good and evil, and the balance must be kept. But at some point, evil got bored and killed good. The good school was tainted by evil because the best evil is disguised as good. The Lord of Evil wanted to invert good and bad and did so by pretending to be his brother, Lord of Good, and infiltrating the school of good with evil in subtle ways. This is what happened to our world. At some point in history, the Lord of Good was killed, and the Lord of Evil took over, pretending to be the Lord of Good by inverting everything. Suddenly the truth became evil, so only his people would have the truth. The lies were made to keep the masses in ignorance, and even worse, caused the good to be poisoned with bad. This was a manifestation of the fall of consciousness. Man means mind. The fall of man is the fall of the consciousness or mind. The Lord of Evil disguised himself as the Lord of Good and took over the world. He made the world believe a lie. The Lord of Good was initially represented by Enki, who is the savior of humanity, god of wisdom and water, represented by the serpent. He was also personified in gods such as Hermes, Osiris, Mercury, and Odin. He represents the higher mind, Christ consciousness, so he was also known as Jesus in the Bible. This is the blue half of the yin-yang circle. When it fell into the abyss, Enki became Lord of the Abyss. He was Lord of the underworld and was demonized in relation to the new god, the god of evil. So in this sense, Enki became Satan, but only in relation to the new god. There is no actual Satan. Satan is just an adversary, and the adversary is the adversary to the opposing force. The god of evil would be his brother Enlil, god of the air, represented by the eagle. He's also known as Jupiter, Set, Zeus, and Thor. He represents the lower carnal mind, or ego consciousness, and so represents the red half of the yin-yang circle, or Yahweh. In the mythologies surrounding these gods, they are typically brothers or at odds with one another. When the polarities last flipped, Enlil became ruler of the earth and Enki went into hiding.
I created them, and they reward my love with defiance? There will be no truce. Finally, some rage from you. How long has it been? How long, brother, since you've seen my face? Hades. Endless years I've watched from the underworld.
Films such as this paint the gods in the opposite light because the ruler of this world is Zeus, the current consciousness, and the current consciousness perceives Zeus as the loving father and Hades as the fearful antagonist. Good and evil is nothing more than perspective. Now, one might ask, how is it that these two polarities are dominated by two male figures when yin-yang represents the male and the female? Yin-yang represents the opposing forces of the universe. Push, pull, out, in, up, down, yes, no, male, female. Mind in itself is a masculine trait. Heart is a feminine trait. The concept of the male figure is an allegory representing the masculine mind, the two hemispheres of the mind, represented by two half-brothers. They're not literally two men. Just because the rulers happen to be two brothers doesn't necessarily mean that it is a masculine energy. The plot for The School for Good and Evil is based around two schools, one for good and one for evil, which were set up by two brothers who are responsible for maintaining the balance in the world.
Thousands of years you always gave the heroes the upper hand! I held the balance with you!
It's my turn now.
Revolve!
I dictate the turns. And it's going to be a very different world.
We can work together!
Evil doesn't cooperate. Evil doesn't share. And when I'm done, evil won't lose.
They embody the polarities of red and blue. Eventually, one brother grows bored and kills the other so he can dominate the world. This is the evil brother, red, that took over blue. These two embody the conflicting energies of the universe, the battle between God and the devil, good and evil, red and blue. This is very similar to Star Wars. In fact, they even have red and blue swords. Swords is an anagram for words. This universe is built on words, sonoluminescence. Taurus comes from words. And God said, "Let there be light." Everything is manifested from words. Words cast spells. We are in a spell-binding book, a story, a Taurus. Taurus is formed from speaking. The fairy tale in The School for Good and Evil begins with a young girl named Sophie, who's living the story of Cinderella and Snow White. Sophie desperately wants to escape her world as she's never been outside of it, and she dreams of becoming a princess. Sophie means wisdom in her gnosis. She lives in a small town named Gavaldon with her best friend Agatha, who in this world is labeled a witch. And yet Agatha means noble, good. Sophie hears of the school for good and evil and thinks this will save her, so she writes down her wish and puts it in the wishing tree. This is similar to Alice in Wonderland, as Alice wishes she had a world of her own and falls asleep under a tree. The tree is the Taurus. Be careful what you wish for. Wishing is casting a spell. Sophie then gets taken along with Agatha to the schools, but she's dropped in what she believes to be the wrong school. Sophie is dropped in the school for evil and Agatha the school for good. Perhaps the reason they were dropped in these schools is to bring out their true selves, to address their shadow selves, to reverse the inversion imposed on them by their other world, as once they begin their training in their respective schools, these two are revealed to be inverted. Sophie is in fact the witch and Agatha the princess. Agatha wants to help her friend get into the school for good, but shows that she doesn't trust that Sophie can find her way out of her own problems, and as a result messes things up for her. Agatha ends up being too nice to the point that that turns out to be bad. This shows that within the good exists some bad, and vice versa. Agatha's behavior causes Sophie to turn against her friend for not believing in her. This is due to the illusion of perception. Now that Sophie is in the school for evil, she's starting to perceive things as evil. Agatha, on the other hand, has no desire to be in either school and was not affected by it, so she saw people as both good and bad. The scene that held the most truth for me was when the girls went to visit the headmaster in the tower to tell him that he made a mistake putting Sophie in the wrong school. As the girls enter the tower, they hear a voiceover narrating their every move. This is the voice of the quill pen writing their story as they live it. This illustrates the feedback loop of this reality, the illusion of cause and effect. Our lives are simultaneously scripted as it is lived and written as we live it, so there's no knowing which came first because both are intertwined. What you perceive to be free will is an illusion because your story is already written. Then Agatha asks if he means that all the stories are real. And he replies, "Our graduates live the events that become the stories that change the world. We teach you how to fulfill your destiny." Sophie says that's what she wants, but insists he made a mistake and she's in the wrong school. She belongs in good. The headmaster tells them there are no mistakes, but let's just say he did make one. Then she would have to prove that he did. Because once the quill pen that writes the stories has started to write it, it can only be changed by the pen. There's one thing that will change course. What's the one thing that evil can never have, that good can never do without? Agatha says true love. And the quill pen says, and that's traditionally manifested in a kiss. And so Sophie must find her prince to kiss, but no kiss comes without a price. This scene blatantly tells us what I've been saying in my videos since 2020. Our stories are written for us. We are living the myths, the fairy tales, the movies, and these stories are real. And that the only way to restore the balance in the world is through true love's kiss. This is because the two opposites must come together in love. Delta. The Lord of Evil has manipulated this law to serve his own benefit. He proclaims that someone from the school of evil must earn true love's kiss, meaning himself. One of the people at the school we are introduced to is Tedros, the son of King Arthur. Sophie becomes determined to make Tedros her true love, but in the process becomes queen of the school for evil. She discovers her true powers and embraces who she really is. This leads to her becoming selfish, cruel, and jealous. She turns against her friend, her mind poisoned by the words of the Lord of Evil, who speaks to her vanity through the mirror in Snow White fashion. It's also no coincidence that the headmistress for the School for Evil is played by Charlize Theron, who also played the Queen in Snow White and the Huntsman. It's eventually revealed that the headmaster is not the good brother, but really the bad brother pretending to be the good one. He polluted the good school so he could take over the world, but he needed his true love in order to destroy both worlds.
This was all a test, Sophie. All of it. A test to find my true love.
He tricked Sophie into being his true love, and when she kissed him, the schools collapsed and all the students died. But Agatha comes to save her, and Sophie realizes the error of her ways, and she apologizes. Sophie sacrifices herself to save her friend's life, and she dies. Agatha kisses Sophie, which is true love's kiss, and the schools are restored. Agatha embodied true love as she saw good in evil and evil in good. So why then, if Sophie's kiss was not true love's kiss, did the schools crumble when Sophie kissed the headmaster? My best explanation of this is that it was a spell. Because the headmaster tricked Sophie into complying, and she believed that she held the power of true love, which he needed to complete his task. So it fulfilled a spell or contract that resulted in the manifestation of his desire. Even this was part of the girls' story. When the girls first came to see him, he told them they had to prove that he had made a mistake because the story was set unless they could get the quill pen to change it. The headmaster manipulating Sophie to get her to destroy both schools showed Sophie what she was truly capable of as the queen of evil, and she didn't like what she saw. She was heartbroken. Sophie had everything she desired, her prince, she was a queen, and she was the head of a kingdom, but it came at a price. She needed to be heartbroken, as we need to be heartbroken in this physical reality, in that we must realize there is no fulfillment in physical earthly desires. When Sophie saw that Agatha was not dead after all, Sophie was relieved and did not hesitate to leap at her friend's defense when her life was in danger. Sophie needed to act out of pure selflessness, as to that point she had acted in pure selfishness. This act of selflessness showed the good in the evil. When Agatha kissed Sophie out of her heartbreak, the balance was restored. Agatha's desire to look out for her friend also causes Agatha to ignore her own needs and completely overlook the fact that Tedros is in love with her.
But I can't leave my friend. Thank you, Tedros.
In the end, Agatha goes home with Sophie, and initially I thought she should have stayed with Tedros because she's supposed to stay with her true love. But this is a story of Sophie and Agatha coming together as one, as they represent the black and white aspects of Sophia. The girls return home to find nothing has changed, but because they now appreciate being there, they see the world in a different way, through the eyes of true love, and so it appears to be different to them. So I'm going to delve deeper into Cinderella because it's relevant here. In the School for Good and Evil, the beginning of the fairy tale has these two girls living a simple, ordinary life, wishing they would be taken away into another world that was more glamorous. Sophie in particular wished she would become a princess so she would be adored and at the center of attention. In wishing she was living another life, she diminished the value of the life she was living. She didn't appreciate what she had.
Once upon a time, there lived a girl named Sophie, a brave creature of exquisite beauty and uncommon grace, who was destined to change the world.
Sophie! I know you can hear me!
Someone save me.
Sophie starts out living the cinder part of the story of Cinderella, but when she gets to the school, she merges with the story of Snow White, and quickly becomes the rival of Lesso, Charlize Theron, for the affections of the headmaster. She falls deeper and deeper into the spell of her own image, like Narcissus. It gave her the opportunity to see who she really was inside, and she didn't like it. So in the process of trying to convince the headmaster that she belongs in the school for good, Sophie instead inverts the schools from good to evil and vice versa, thus convincing herself that evil is good and good is evil. Ultimately, good and evil are merely perceptions. Sophie and Agatha create a new story together. Agatha and Sophie mirror one another. What Agatha is on the inside, Sophie believed herself to be on the outside. However, the reverse was also true. They needed to be dropped in the wrong schools for this to be revealed in order for them to fully love and appreciate themselves and each other, which is why they were the ones to create True Love's Kiss. Cinderella is one of the most common fairy tales told on film. Little girls wanting to be princesses because the lifestyle looks so glamorous, easy, feminine, I think also appeals to something deeper.
Peaceful, prosperous, and rich in romance and tradition. Here in a stately chateau, there lived a widowed gentleman and his little daughter, Cinderella.
The idea that Cinderella must slave away in subservience to others all day in manual labor signifies the arduous nature of this mundane reality when we don't know our true nature. Cinders are ash in the fireplace. Humans are made from carbon, ash, dust, and El, the light within. Cinderella is belittled by her ugly stepsisters and her stepmother, and her light is diminished by those around her. This is why Sophie feels she must become a princess. She knows there's something more to life and more she has to offer, but it's being suppressed in this small town. The fireplace is the heart. The heart is also the pineal gland. It's the heart of the head. Jesus points to the heart, and we must join heart with mind. Mind is masculine, heart is feminine. Heart is Venus or Aphrodite, mind is Mercury or Hermes, and the joining of the two is the hermaphrodite, two becoming one. When the Christos oil is raised while we indulge in the material, it becomes ash. When it is raised while we meditate, it turns carbon into crystal and becomes the Emerald City. Marrying the prince is marrying the heart with mind. Cinderella made a wish and her fairy godmother showed her all she could have. Now one could argue that all of this is demonic because she cast a spell and turned animals into humans and lured her into temptation for wanting money, love, fame, glamour, and material things. But the ugly stepsisters were the ones who were clamoring after those things. Cinderella just wanted to go to the ball. At the ball, the prince saw her radiance within. The fancy dress was just her ticket into the ball. Her light was what made her be seen. But Cinderella did nothing to earn these things. She just made a wish, just as Sophie made a wish. And the wish reveals what's in your heart. But her sisters didn't want her to go to the ball, so they tore her dress to shreds, humiliating her and diminishing her light once again. Their jealousy of her light is intended to keep her small, but more importantly, intended to put pressure on her so she rises. This is the leavening. Cinderella went off to the garden. The garden is meditation, the walled garden of the mind, where she broke down in tears. Breaking down in tears is surrendering. This is the moment she lets go of having to do everything manually and surrendering to our higher self, the fairy godmother. This is symbolic of the God power within, your ability to magically turn things around with your mind. One of the songs from the film version of Cinderella is "A dream is a wish your heart makes." And the lyrics are very telling.
A dream is a wish your heart makes when you're fast asleep. In dreams you will lose your heartache. Whatever you wish for, you keep. Have faith in your dreams, and someday your rainbow will come smiling through. No matter how your heart is grieving, if you keep on believing, the dream that you wish will come true.
This world is a dream our heart made, and within it, we make other dreams from the heart. We create experiences from heartbreak. We automatically call things into our experience because our heart desires it. When we are hungry, we desire food. When we are lonely, we desire company. When you are aligned with the heart, you know your desires are automatically fulfilled and no longer need to focus on the desire. In dreams, you will lose your heartaches. This world is created from heartbreak. When what we wish for manifests in a dream or an experience outside of ourselves, we gain what our hearts long for through that experience. So what we wish for, we keep. We don't keep the dream itself because that's temporary, but the lesson we learn from the experience, the essence, the expansion we gain from it is what we keep, because that's what we longed for in the first place. Have faith in your dreams, and someday your rainbow will come smiling through. Faith is the leap we make in trusting our inner guidance, and the dream is the world experience we created. Having that faith allows us to see the truth, the rainbow, seeing through the illusion. No matter how your heart is grieving, if you keep on believing the dream that you wish will come true. But be careful what you wish for. Sophie's wish came true, but it came true in a dark way, as a warning to her that she was headed down a dark path. Your wishes keep coming true before your eyes, but we are often blind to it because it isn't appearing to us in the way in which we want. You might wish for a love relationship with a prince and get one with the Prince of Darkness. It depends on where you are and what you need to experience in your life to get to where you truly want to be. So for Sophie, she needed to face her inner ugly stepsister so she could become a better friend and a better person. Her story, though, didn't end at ugly. It was a stepping stone on her path to becoming the princess she needed to be and wanted to be and knew herself to be. Same with Cinderella. She needed to overcome the torment of her ugly stepsisters to finally have the courage to let out her inner light and become the princess she truly is. When Cinderella's coach turned back into a pumpkin, she was left with a single glass slipper. The glass slipper represents the crystallization of her soul, the pineal gland. It is assumed that there was perhaps a mistranslation of the glass slipper in Cinderella, as it was originally written as voir, not ver, and voir means fur, and ver means glass. But voir also means to see, and glass is also the looking glass. And when one's pineal gland is open, crystal, glass, one is able to see. Glass originates from the root gel, G-H-E-L, which means to shine. When Cinderella becomes a princess, she shines like a diamond, glass, because she has found her inner light, L. Gel also forms words for gold, your AU, authenticity. She's finally able to be her true self and let her light shine. The process of inner alchemy requires that we face our shadow selves. Good must face their evil side, and evil must face their good side. This is why we see good girls gone bad or good girls drawn to bad boys. If we deny or suppress that part of us, it manifests outside of us. This results in things like Christian guilt and self-destructive behaviors. In facing it, we can better understand it and come to appreciate and accept it as part of the wholeness of who we really are, a balance of both good and evil. This film, The School for Good and Evil, blatantly displays what I've been showing in my videos, that life is a fairy tale, that we are living a story that's already written for us. It's the myths and fairy tales. And that the answer lies in true love's kiss, which is marrying the opposites. The moment you realize good and evil are two halves of the same coin, and they come from love.
For he knew once she remembered,
the spell would be broken.
The prince and Jane married and lived happily ever after.
Don't be surprised if watching this film unlocks access to some deeper truths. The power of film is its ability to transmit so much information to all levels of consciousness, and there is something in this film that reaches your core. Life is a fairy tale. Find true love and have your happy ending. The end is only the beginning. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.